the chair, and I'm certainly glad that we're holding this hearing. I do want to thank our witnesses for being here to testify, and certainly looking forward to hearing from all of you and learning about how our nation can more efficiently plan our budget to prepare for future pandemics. I can't help but think I'm sitting here in the Rules Committee by myself. This hearing is being done virtually, but it was just a little over 2 years ago that we had one of the first rules hearings to regard the what were the initial stages of this pandemic. And it's hard to believe that not only are we on the second anniversary of that, we are going into the third year of the pandemic, and certainly you can recognize a certain amount of pandemic fatigue around the country, and every congressional district is encountering that and recognizing that. I do hope today's hearing is productive, and I am anxious to see and learn how our budgetary process and our response can improve our pandemic preparedness. And Chairman Morelli, I just have to point out, and Chairman McGovern, that we are probably, you referenced an appropriations acknowledging that there is going to be future disaster mitigation necessary. We are actually about, 3 weeks away from the lapse of an appropriation lapse in our governmental funding. Unfortunately, because of where we are in the process, we are very likely to see additional continuing resolutions. And as you both know, it is impossible to plan for or to budget money for future disasters if you are only using a continuing resolution process, because by its very nature, that is a process where you only look back and fund the activities of the previous year or years, not what is going to be happening in the future. So I certainly hope that we, and I'm sensitive to the fact that our ranking member of the full Rules Committee is an appropriator, so I want to be careful what I say, but at the same time, we really do depend upon the appropriations process to do their work. And then of course, we will do our work in the Rules Committee when they finish their product. But here we are, we're in the largest and most devastating pandemic, and certainly in my lifetime. In fact, I serve on another committee that has jurisdiction over pandemic preparedness. That's the Committee on Energy and Commerce. And I've been asking our committee, the Committee on Energy and Commerce, to hold just such a hearing for certainly longer than a year, probably almost 2 years. And recently I sent a letter to Chairman Pallone of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, expressing my frustration and disappointment with the lack of response from the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the primary committees that should deal with public health. I think we have much to learn from the experience that we've all been through the past 2 years, but our committee has been, the Energy and Commerce Committee has been eerily silent, and it is a point of personal frustration to me that the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has a responsibility in this area, really has not shouldered that responsibility. And this is not just a criticism of the majority Democrats. I think that criticism actually applies to both sides of the dais. I cannot believe how passive we have been on the Committee on Energy and Commerce as far as asking the hard questions and providing information as an authorizing committee to our appropriators, and then ultimately to the Rules Committee before a process comes to the floor. It has been extremely frustrating to be in the minority during this pandemic, but it's also extremely frustrating to be part of a committee that should be in the vanguard, should be in the lead, and in fact has not even shown up. So the Energy and Commerce Committee reauthorized a bill. It was called the Pandemic All Hazard Preparedness Act of 2018. And this very situation, it is what we were aiming to prevent and for which we were attempting to be prepared. And I believe that we can all agree that we have had many successful accomplishments from the Pandemic All Hazard Preparedness Act, the one thing that it should have done, which was prepare us for this pandemic, it did not do. And again, going to my previous frustration, we had no real time, no actual hearings as an authorizing committee on the Committee of Energy and Commerce, looking at this in real time while the drama was unfolding around us. We had the Pandemic All Hazard Preparedness Act signed into law in June of 2019, 6 months later to be visited by this pandemic. And we never asked a single question. Did we get it right? What could we have done better? What should we learn for next time? So it's not often that we have a real live case study to intricately examine the effectiveness of the policies that we just passed. And many of us, those of us who are witnesses today and those of us on the legislative side, we've had some experience with this over the years. One significant success that did occur during the first year of the pandemic, the significant milestone of the previous administration, the Trump administration, was that of Operation Warp Speed. Because of this program, we have access to vaccines, we have access to effective therapeutics, and the very existence of those vaccines and therapeutics begs the question, what made Operation Warp Speed so successful? And are there ways that we can apply these successes to our government's regular duties so that we don't just have to respond at the time of an emergency? It's critically important that we take the time to examine the program while we still have an opportunity to speak with those who developed and deployed it, those who were on the front lines, those who lived it. And so for that reason, we're so very fortunate to have Dr. Kadlec at our witness table today. Additionally, it's an opportune time to compare our nation's response to the novel coronavirus to other pandemics that we've encountered. For example, while on different scales, the Ebola outbreak that ravaged Western Africa in 2014 and 2015, in fact, made its way to this country and ended up in my backyard in Dallas, Texas. It took 5.5 years for an Ebola vaccine to be developed and produced and receive emergency use authorization. That's why the stunning success of Operation Warp Speed, standing in stark contrast, where over a 9-month period, we had the streamlining of the process at the emergency use authorization process at the FDA and got that vaccine in the hands of our constituents. Furthermore, I think it's pertinent to learn about what we're currently doing in the current administration to further the progress, the success of the previous administration's pandemic response. We also must determine exactly where the almost $5.5 trillion that Congress has appropriated for these efforts, where are those dollars today, which have been spent and what remains unspent, and when we talk about further activities, we really can't authorize new spending. We can't appropriate new spending until we know where the last dollars have gone. Effective oversight is going to be a key component of any successful pandemic preparedness and response effort. And in fact, we really can't talk about how we budget for future problems if we don't understand where the dollars went, where the successes and the missteps were in the last effort. Plain and simple, we really can't plan for future pandemic preparedness unless we have a strong understanding of what has worked and what has not worked. We find ourselves in a unique and really a historic position. While these past 2 years have been exhausting for Americans, now's not the time to just sit back and hope that we won't find ourselves in a similar crisis in the future. This will be our best opportunity to create strategic and smart policy that will help ensure that the next time this occurs, the country is properly prepared and that preparation can be properly executed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing. Thanks to our witnesses, and I'll yield back.